Hey everybody, back with another video in this series with the Atari football stuff, futzing around with Atari football. So it was going on a little bit longer, so this board is not in a state. We're going to go back in time a little bit and just look at testing the voltage regulator and power supply, as well as messing with my power supply, measuring some amperage, doing some resistance stuff, and really trying to figure out how to best power this board on the bench, etc. So, and also test the voltage regulator here, as well as bring in an Atari power brick for 10 volts unregulated and stuff like that. So, anyway, watch the first part first, and then hopefully this one is interesting as well. See ya. Alright, so I'm ready to test out the LM323 regulator. I don't know if this is a great way to test it out or not. You can give feedback. I'm hooked onto C47 with my negative on this side, positive on this side, and that matches up with the B, what is it? B and 2 is my positive, and then ground is A and 1. Alright, I got everything turned down, and also I have hooked up to this capacitor, which is C23. I have my voltmeter, so I'm able to kind of see what's going on here. So we're going to power it on. We'll adjust our amps here. Alright, I'm getting like 2.3 volts. It's only a 3 amp power supply, so about 4 volts. My power supply doesn't have enough amps. I got it cranked up. Doesn't have enough amps to drive this board. That's crazy, right? Or maybe that LM323 isn't working. I'm only getting 4.3 volts. Sending 6.7 to the LM323. It's putting out 4.3, which seems to be close. I changed up my connectors. Maybe I don't have great connectors, that might be, but it's definitely pulling the amps, which is crazy. It's running 4.3 volts. I'm sending 10 volts into the LM323, and it's outputting 4.3 volts. And I have an actual image on the screen, but it's scrolling, which is kind of weird. Maybe I should... Let me come back and make sure the board still works. Cool, the board still works. I didn't mess it up or anything. Kind of doing some experimenting. 4.9 volts at this capacitor with my test leads from my regular power supply onto there. So, I don't know, is the LM323, I mean, it just seems like 3 amps is a lot to be pulling from just this board. And it should be, I don't know, it just seems crazy. I guess I could try to measure how many amps, but... Alright, tried it with the other board that I obviously know is working as well, but I don't know about the LM323. Whoops. Interesting. I don't know what is going on with... I think my power supply died or something. Which would be interesting. I had just repaired it. Anyway, hooked the board back up and it works fine. So, I don't know if my power supply is good enough to actually test it this way. Oh, that kind of sucks. Alright, I'm getting back to this. It's been a couple weeks or maybe a week or something, but hooked up an ohm hooked up a resistor, 5 ohm resistor, just to test my power supply, and you can see it's definitely working still. Not a problem, but definitely, you know, this is a 3 amp power supply, and I guarantee you this thing could be pulling more than that. I don't know, but it didn't seem like it had enough. So what I did was I actually broke out my centipede. I had this, it's like a spare Atari power brick that I wired up. I'll link to Dokert's video. He does a nice little overview of testing the Atari power bricks, but I just wired up something quick because I had these connectors here, wired it up so I could turn it on. Made a little adapter for the 10 volts unregulated that's coming from the Atari power brick. So even though that's a centipede, it's, you know, sending the same 10 volts unregulated to the game PCB as an Atari football. Now, one of the differences is the Atari football is sending 25 volts AC. Over here, ground is all the same. The center tap and ground is the same, but the centipede is sending out 36 volts AC. So I'm only going to send half of the AC, and I think this is half wave. It's not a full wave rectified. It's like half wave rectified or something. I don't know. I tried to do some reading up on it, and it's a little bit beyond me to understand it, but let's see. AC, full wave AC is coming in here, full wave AC is coming in here, and I'm only going to put it on one side, which should give us you know, somewhere around 18 volts or something like that, or 20, somewhere around there, and then it gets regulated to down to 12 volts by this 7812, I think, or something, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, got a little JAMA adapter hooked up. I also wired it so I could power it through my normal 5 volt power supply, because there is a 5 volt here, but it's only on one trace, which isn't obviously ideal. So I'm not going to power it up that way, but I could, with this adapter, power the board up with a non-power supply like that. But I want to test this regulator right here, as well as that regulator, check the audio eventually. I have to order a rheostat because the volume comes out of here. Typically you need like a higher wattage potentiometer, like a rheostat, like 12 or 20. I ordered a 25 volt rheostat for like $10, but it's not here yet, so I can test the audio. But anyway, what am I doing? I'll hook this up on the tripod. Alright, we're going to power it on. I have everything hooked up. Yeah, so I'm only using one of the AC lines, so it should be about 18 volts AC going across that rectifier, then gets filtered by this capacitor here, and then goes into this 7812, and then that has this capacitor right there. I don't know what this capacitor is doing, actually. I need to look at that. Yeah, we'll test it in this. So one AC line, and then I have my ground and DC going to that connector right there for my Atari power brick. And we'll measure, let's go ahead and turn it on. We'll measure ripple voltage too. So game's working. Turn the contrast down a little bit. So I know I'm getting good 5 volts. Spent a lot of time messing with the damn adapter, but it's okay because I want to be able to test these things better on the bench. Maybe even hook up a trackball and stuff. So let's go across. I have it on auto volts. We're going to go across this capacitor here. 4.9 volts. If I check my 10 volts unregulated, right there, we're at 11.6. If I turn it to AC power, we'll check the ripple voltage. Now you should check ripple voltage with a load, so like the game PCB load, obviously. and it's 0.38, which is fine. It should be under 0.5. I'm curious to see if I'm going to test some other ARs. Wonder how much load this actually is putting on that thing. I put a 7 amp fuse and it's not blowing, obviously, so I might check the load. But anyway, all right. Let's check. Go back to auto volts. And we'll check across here. Now this thing over here, this section here gets hot as crap. This resistor, I can actually smell it, like slowly cooking, it feels like. It's very warm. I can just feel the heat coming off of that thing. Maybe I'll use my temperature setting on this thing. We can do that in this video. That could be interesting. So we're getting 23 volts DC across this capacitor, which I don't know off the top of my head which number that is. It's not labeled on this thing. And for our 12 volts, we're at 12.1 volts. So we know our regulators are working correctly. I don't get anything across this capacitor here. I don't know exactly what that capacitor does. That's C50. Oh, this is C, I wrote it down, C62. This is C62, 23 volts there. This capacitor is C58. I'm not getting anything voltage-wise. That's kind of weird. I wonder if something's wrong there. C58. What's this one do? That's C35 is a 5 volt capacitor, obviously. Alright, so all that's good. That board tests fine power wise. You can see the game's working perfectly fine. Right there. And I did some changes so like I didn't have to use my little jumper to that resistor right there for composite video. I basically, I won't show you, but I looped my composite video with red. So whenever I need to use composite video, I'll just wire it to my red JAMA, and that's looped on my PVM to both red and composite video, and it works fine, as you can see. So I think that's, I got you all caught up just using part of the AC thing. That's a little weird. Like, I don't know exactly if that's a good thing or a bad thing, honestly. It's supposed to be 25 volts AC. We're getting about 18 volts AC. Let me see if I showed that to you. If I check my ground. Oh shit. Shorted that thing. Just blew a fuse. Yeah, I blew a fuse because I was being careless with my meter. So I blew one of the 4 amp fuses on that 36 volt AC line. Let's try it again. So just come to ground, and I'm getting 18 volts AC there. Oh, that's weird. I'm getting some DC on the AC line, on the other AC line. That's weird. So instead of 25 volts AC across both of them, I don't know, I'd have to look at the Atari football power brick. This is 36 volts AC, obviously unregulated, so it's probably a little bit higher than that normally. Cut down to 18 volts, and then we have, what do we have, like 25 volts across here. $23 volts. That should be around 18 unregulated, so that's probably okay. Seems to be working fine. We'll have to check the audio amp, which is over in this section. I think that's the audio amp right there. Alright, here's my second board, And one thing I'm a little bit worried about is this resistor. I tested it. Actually, I'll do it real quick. And it's supposed to be, I think, what, 4 ohms? And I'm getting 2.4 ohms, 2.3 ohms. I need to replace this resistor. I'm curious how that's going to affect the 5 volts on this thing. If I bring up, dang, very carefully, hopefully, you can kind of see it. This is my other board. Yeah, it's 3.2 ohms, about 4. Let's see. That's in circuit, obviously, but it's definitely reading less than the other one. And these resistors get cooked, so. Alright, let's power this thing on. If you can see that. Kind of nervous, actually. Alright, I just hooked up some test leads there real quick so I can do it fast in case it's too high. Nope, it's working. 5 volts on the nose. And that's what we get on the screen. So something obviously is not right with this game. I think that's different than what we were seeing before, wasn't it? I do not have test mode hardwired or anything. One and 3. Yeah. So that's 5 volts. Let's switch to AC, see if there's any ripple voltage on that part. Oh, I mean, look at this. Look at that thing smoking. Can you guys see that? Woo! Gotta turn that off. That thing is smoking like crazy. Need to replace that resistor. That thing is smoking like crazy. Damn, I wish. Turn the light off. Let's see. Oh my god, it's working now. Just started working. Same board, but it's smoking like crazy, that resistor. You guys can see that. But I still got solid 5 volts. How did it start working all of a sudden? Yeah, that's crazy. I had to turn it back off though because I didn't want to burn this anymore. You can see how burned up this board is from that resistor getting cooked there. So I need to get some different resistors, setting them up higher off the board most likely. Even this heat sink gets warm as heck. I'll use my temperature thing. I just wanted to show I did repair this trace right here. I actually cleaned all of these traces and put some fresh solder, but smoothed it out, like wiped it off, so you can't. It's not like solder just sitting on top of there. I was just plating the copper again with some solder, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's smooth. Just used my solder sucker and wiped it off. But this board is working, which is crazy. Did I get it working earlier in the video? Because I had done that. Maybe I had gotten it working because I had, oh yeah, I did, right? Yeah, because I fixed the traces and that other thing. Alright, false alarm, never mind. I have to go back and watch my own video. Okay, it's been maybe one day, I don't know. I'm kind of obsessed with this lately, but I was doing some research and I created a thread on KLOV that I'll link to, of course. I pulled this resistor off just to see what it was, and dang it. Turn a light on. Alright, hopefully you can see that. 2 ohms, 20 watt resistor, and the one off this other board, and you can see how burned up it is. The one off this board over here, and I didn't have to pull it off, but I was going to replace them potentially and measure them out of circuit, which I'll do here in a second. This one is a 4 ohm, I believe 10 watt resistor, which is what the manual calls for. So the manual doesn't say 2 ohm, 20 watt, but some Atari boards like Night Driver and that have this onboard power rectification do have 2 ohm 20 watts. So then I did some research on the internet, and I didn't know anything about this R-pass resistor. So this is a pass resistor, and it's kind of in parallel with the LM323 regulator, and it basically shares the current load. So it kind of allows this regulator not to have it regulates the voltage, but not to pass all of the current that the board is pulling. Otherwise you'd have to have this resistor rated, this voltage regulator rated a lot higher, probably than 3 amps. So there's a formula, it's Ohm's law, and I'm sure I'm not telling anybody anything new anyway, whatever I just said. But what you do is you take, to figure out what the resistance of this R-pass resistor should be, you take the voltage in minus the voltage out divided by the amps. And so, one thing that Atari doesn't know is, like, nowadays our wall voltage is no longer like 110. So this unregulated power, I don't think I showed it on the video, but I was getting, on the unregulated, I was getting like 14 volts. Maybe I did show it, I can't remember. But, and that's basically because from the transformer there, I have probably closer to 130 volts or 125 out of my wall. And instead of like back in the 70s or early 80s, it was probably closer to 110. Nowadays, it's, over 120 usually here in the US. It's like almost 130 at my house, sometimes. So that increases that voltage, and so you have 14 volts minus 5 volts, which is 9 divided by 3 equals a 3 ohm resistor. So if we wanted to pull, I guess, 3 amps away from the board or something like that, I think that's how it's working. So I would need a 3 ohm resistor rated at 27 watts, and if I wanted to pull 1.75 amps away, I don't know if I'm saying that part right, but if I wanted to go higher up in ohm value to decrease my wattage of the resistor and how much heat it was dissipating on behalf of the voltage regulator, I would have to go to a 5 ohm based off of the current unregulated voltage coming in, or the voltage in, as an example. And I basically just took a swag of saying, let's say Atari was figuring unregulated, well, it says 10 volts on the schematic, but let's just say it was 12 volts. A 2 ohm resistor, which is what this is, would need to be rated at 24 watts, and it would be taking 3.5 amps at the 7 volts there. And then a 4 ohm resistor would be taking 12 watts. So not completely, the wattage of these resistors isn't really completely up to spec based off of the actual real voltage that we're seeing here, as an example. So anyway, what I'm going to do is actually replace one of these with a new 4 ohm resistor. Actually, let me come back and measure the resistance of these real quick. That's why we had some off resistance. I really have no idea why I get so down the rabbit hole with these things. But we're going to measure this 2 ohm resistor here, if I can. I'll just hold it. No, that can't be right. I'm probably getting some resistance with my fingers. Alright, we're getting about 1.8, 1.7. 1.7 ohms of resistance there. If I do this one, let's see here, 4.2 ohms. So still, you know, within their tolerance. I think this is 10% tolerance. So they're probably still within tolerance of spec, so they're probably still behaving, but this one was smoking like crazy. The other thing is, on the thread on KLOV, but also somebody else that I'll mention here in a second, I mentioned the reason why this is smoking is probably from finger oils and then dust and dirt over the years collecting on it, and it's probably burning it off. That's their theory. I'm actually going to hook it up to... We'll do a little experiment here real quick, and I'll hook it up to my Protek and see if we can burn off those oils. They're saying that this will eventually stop burning. I don't know, but I'm not going to use it anymore, so we might as well do an experiment. The other thing is, I had a long time ago, when I first started messing with these earlier Atari boards, I had seen this. There we go. EZsbc.com. It is a switching power supply, basically in the form factor of a TO3 transistor, that's designed to replace an LM323, because LM323s are obsolete or expensive, I guess, and you can get these for like, I don't know, less than $10 if you buy a few of them. And this switch, it's basically called a PSU5, and this is revision 2. I don't know what revisions are shipping out now, but it really just fits in there and completely eliminates really the heat and eliminates the need for this pass resistor, because this pass resistor is really for a linear power supply configuration, and this will take that unregulated 14 volts and drop it down to 5 volts in a very modern form factor, and it'll fit right there where that LM323 is. So we are going to do that, obviously. And then I'll put a resistor on this other board. So anyway, that's something I'm going to do actually probably right now, I guess. And then let's see, one other thing that I purchased this week for my audio is I picked up this rheostat, which is rated for 25 watts, 50 ohm, so I can actually hook up to Atari audio. I'm hoping this works, and I put it on my little bracket here that I have my test buttons and stuff on. So I'm hoping that all works out. I got that wired up and ready to go too. Anything else that I wanted to say? No, I don't think so. Alright, I went to ohmscalculator.com and put in my 2 ohm resistor at 2 ohm resistor at 6 volts will pull 3 amps and create 18 watts of energy or heat, I guess, dissipation. So I'm going to power this up, and we're at 6 volts right away. 2.8 amps, 6.3 volts is what my Protek is saying. And let's watch this thing. Actually, I'll pause and come back, but this thing should start to cook. I mean, that's around 18 watts, or the maximum of the 20 wattage. I could turn it down a little bit, actually. Let's turn it down to about... Let's go right to 5. 5 volts, 2.3 amps is what it's pulling there. So we'll let that heat up and see if it starts smoking. Alright, I think you can kind of see it, the smoke rising right there, hopefully. I don't know if it helps with the light on or not. Still at 5 volts, 2.3 amps. Now, you know, in the game, it was probably around almost 40 watts, you know, that this thing was actually pulling through it, or the full, or at least all the amps that the board was generating. So it's not smoking as bad, but it is hot and it is cooking a little bit. So we'll let that go. But actually, I might just, let's bump this up. Whoops. To 6 volts, which should be 18 watts and 3 amps, but my thing's saying 2.76, but whatever. We'll see if this, it is definitely smoking. I can actually see the smoke rising up right through, right in front of my Protek right there. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm just going to let it keep going. Yeah, I can't tell that it's smoking any more than it was. It's been a couple minutes. I started this not completely, so it's been on there for maybe 6 minutes or so. I started my stopwatch there a little bit after I got started with this process, but still smoking, I think. I'll be back in a little bit. All right, it's probably been on the power supply for, gosh, I can't talk, power supply for about 9 minutes at this point, and I don't see it smoking anymore. As far as I can tell, yeah, it doesn't look like it. Hopefully the music doesn't catch YouTube, but yeah, it doesn't really look. I guess it was just dirt and oil, as the guys on KLOV and actually the person from Daniel from EZsbc.com said that is probably just finger oil and dirt collected and getting burned off as it heated up. So the resistor is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the board, and this probably would have continued to work fine. Which one? It's not that one, but still I'm going to replace it and do something that generates less heat there with the switching power supply. Really just for heat reasons. That's the only reason. Board was working fine with the linear power supply. Alright, I'll be right back. But yeah, I can't tell. I mean, it doesn't look like it's smoking anymore. Oil and dirt. False alarm. Alright, I have my, what is it, EZsbc, I think. 323 switching replacement in. Got my meter hooked up. I did wire up a coin switch in my speaker. I don't know if I wired it up correctly, and it could come on extremely loud. I have no idea. Let's see. Crossing my fingers that I didn't screw anything up here. Put that back on. It doesn't really need the heat sink, but you can keep it on there, and I will, because I don't want to lose it, obviously. Here we go. I'm a little nervous, actually. Okay, I don't get anything. Why is that? I'm wondering if I need to actually put this resistor, like a jumper in there for that resistor. I don't know, I didn't think through that part, but that might be part of the issue. This is the other board I have. I flipped it over. This is where the resistor goes, and that's one of either the emitter or whatever, one of the legs of the voltage regulator. See, this voltage regulator goes to this side of the resistor, this one goes to the other side of the resistor, and I need to put a jumper in there. Put a little jumper in there, a pretty thick gauge wire that would fit in the hole anyway. And let's see what we got here. Do it like this. Kind of nervous still. Whoop, that was not good. I saw 9 volts going through there. That's not good. Yikes. So that voltage regulator is something's, it did not like that voltage regulator. That's not good. The good news is still working. I powered it on with my switching power supply. I just didn't use that. So that is weird. What is going on? I don't know why that didn't work. I have to think about it, but the good news is the board's still working. I caught it pretty fast. Getting 4.7 volts through the board, just through this one little jumper right there, to the 5 volts for the trackball, I think. Or maybe it's the LEDs, I'm not sure. No, it's gotta be the trackball. But no audio because I can't do that with this setup, so No, I can do the audio with this setup. Let me come right. Alright, that was a totally boneheaded idea of replacing this resistor with a jumper. I was going fast in the middle of my workday when I'm not supposed to be messing with this obviously stuff, but I wasn't thinking about it. I mean, this is the voltage input into the regulator, and this is the voltage output. And basically, sorry, this is the voltage input, this is the voltage output of the regulator. These are ground, obviously. And I don't know why. I was just going too fast like an idiot. If I put a jumper in here in front instead of the resistor, basically I'm bypassing the voltage regulator and sending voltage straight to the 5 volt rail. So, obviously not what you want to do, and I don't know why. Again, just being careless. That's sometimes happens. Sometimes you learn the hard way. Thank goodness I didn't pay for it this time. So anyway, I have been doing some other research and stuff and asking some people on KLOV and updating the thread, and I love KLOV because the guys are way smarter than me and can guide me a little bit in my experimenting, which is the way I learn. Hopefully I'm sharing that learning experience with you guys. But this voltage regulator, or the switching power supply, and that's really what this is. It's a mini switching power supply, but it's rated, I believe, for like 3 amps, according to, I haven't reached out to the manufacturer yet, the guys that make this. But obviously, with a resistor in there, it's going to take away some of the current load off of the switching power supply while still regulating the voltage. And let's hook up our meter to that real quick. And let's see here. Gonna hook up our -5. Got these big alligator clip thingies, even though they're hard to work. There we go. Like that. And like this. And we're going to turn it on. And get our voltage on there. Can you see that okay? Okay. Let me take it off the tripod real quick. No, actually I'm good. Alright, get my monitor on. Hopefully I have everything hooked up right. I'm not going too fast again. Plugged in. Alright, and we have 5 volts going through with the pass resistor. So I think this switching power supply was shutting down because there was too much current load on it. But obviously it is working with the pass resistor in there, which is taking some of the load off, and you can see game is running perfectly fine. So then that led down, and I've already done some of this research, is to figure out how much current is actually being pulled from the 5 volt rail with all the TTL chips. So I'm going to test and document. I already did it, but I'll test and document it again. Be right back with the setup on that, and then we'll go back and the good news is, let me see how hot this resistor is getting. Yeah, it's still getting pretty damn hot. So obviously using this replacement LM323 switching power supply instead of this voltage regulator, you can't do it without this resistor in there. The current, it's probably got to shut down somewhere around 3 amps is what my expectation is. So you definitely need a resistor there. So let me come back and let's measure the amp load on the 5-volt rail. Right, so to measure the amp load on the 5-volt rail, basically I have my power supply that didn't have enough juice when going through the 10-volt unregulated. Actually, let me back up a little bit. I'm going to keep my mistakes in the video. Obviously, I could have wiped them out and made myself seem like I'm smart, but this is my learning journey, sharing with you guys. So, you know, it's not called Jack Lick's Arcade Repair Journey for no reason. Just thankfully I didn't screw myself. Anyway, going to power this up through Protek 3003, which has a 3 amp limit. So we're going to be pushing the power supply pretty high. Got it wired through my meter for my amp measurement to my 5-volt power supply here. This is ground, going to ground, positive, going through this meter here over to there, so to measure amps. And then I have another meter just to measure what the voltage is at the board. So let's go ahead and, do I need to do anything? No, power it up. And we don't see anything on the screen. It's kind of, there we go. It's trying to boot. Can I get it to boot? See, I'm only at 4.16 volts. There's that screen that we were getting. That's probably because we weren't getting enough voltage on there. And we're at 3.1 amps, so we don't have enough voltage. We're not able to generate quite enough voltage. With our power supply here. I did get it to boot at one point, but maybe because I have my meter on there, I'm taking too much away. Let's see. Positive lead. Yeah, it's not liking it. Just not enough juice, I don't think. Alright, let me see if I can get it powered back up. Alright, I disconnected my other meter because I might have actually been pulling on the circuit a little bit, the 5-volt circuit. And I'm getting, this is saying 4.9 volts, 3.15. This is saying 3.2 amps. Game is running. And let me see if I can actually, while it's running, hook up my tester. It's running with 4.18 volts. So I got it running, maxing out my power supply amp wise. 4.18 volts at the board, which is crazy that the game's even running at such a low voltage. And 3.2 amps. So, all right, I wanted to show that, and I think I might reach out and figure out where the voltage shutdown circuit, if it's configurable at all or something. Might be able to drive this power supply a little bit higher, just enough to get rid of that resistor. We'll see. All right, one other thing I wanted to test is my temperature setting. I guess this is room temperature, 75, 74 degrees or something. Oh, it's going down. Game's still running. We'll just credit up real quick. There we go. Game's still running, and just figured I'd do a quick temperature check of the heatsink here with the switcher on there, the PSU5 switching LM323. What is it called? Is it LM? Yeah, LM323 replacement. And it's, let's see here, not very warm, and the heat that's probably getting is probably just from this ground pad and maybe from the resistor itself. But let's see if we touch this resistor here. That's pretty hot. About 300 degrees Fahrenheit. That's definitely hot enough to cook some food, huh? That's how hot that resistor is. Crazy. So, wanted to get some baseline temperatures. I will probably power up my other board over here so we can measure the heatsink there, but after I get a different resistor on it with the original LM323s there. So, cool. Actually, let me just measure the ground here. I've never done this actually, using my temperature sensor. Could be an interesting way to measure. Some people use thermal cameras to take pictures of their boards and thermal temperature gauges, I guess. I don't know. I don't have one of those. I'm using whatever came with my EEV blog. But it's about, the ground rail is about, you know, what, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. If I measure at different locations, yeah. As I measure this ground rail, as it gets closer to that resistor, obviously it's getting warmer, and that's probably what we're measuring right here at this heatsink. So the heatsink is probably dissipating some of the heat from the ground rail. Oh, we ran out of time, so we did hear the whistle beep, so that's good news too. It's 96 degrees. Let me just come to see if it goes all the way to 300 again. .300 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. Super interesting. Alright, I'll be back with something else. Alright, some mail came in. It's the next day, and I got a couple of these. I think they're called XC. I'll link to them in the YouTube description stuff, or notes. 25 watt 4 ohm resistor, and I also got a 5-pack of 10 watt 4 ohm resistors, which was, that's where I got them from Amazon. They came pretty quick, within like a couple days. And I went ahead and mounted one of those 4 ohm resistors, and it's actually kind of nice because there's a hole on the resistor. If you can see that right there. And I just mounted it to this, the heatsink for the LM323. Don't know if that's a great idea or not, but screwed it in there. It's mounted, should dissipate some heat. Tied that resistor in right there. So going to power it on. This is my other board. Haven't tested the audio on it. So let me hook up on a tripod and put a multimeter on here. Right, so we don't. I think we're good here. Everything hooked up right, I think. All right, 4.9 volts. That's good. Game's running. Turn down the contrast a little bit. Alright, so that's running, so anyway, and we're going to let this run for a little bit. I'll hook up my meter to the 12 volt rail, see what that's showing. And we're going to let this heat up, and we'll come back and do a temperature measurement. It's definitely getting hot. We'll see if it's gets as hot as the other one. All right, here we go. Got my little meter here. And I'll let it run a little bit longer, but we're looking at 142, 144. $140, it's still rising a little bit. So we'll come back, see what the heat sink is. Now I'm on the heat sink instead of the resistor. Going to go to different spots of the heat sink right there. Around 130 something. I mean, so far, I think this is a good little mod right here. Getting these resistors, these XLs. I think they're called XCELL, I'm pretty sure. I mean, we're at about 190. I'll let the game run for a little bit and come back and do another measurement. We'll let it run for at least, 5 minutes or something. Alright, it's been a few minutes. I'm not going to let it run for hours and stuff, but I'm sure this is about operating temperature. And we got, let's see where it stops at. Just holding it right there on the resistor. I know it's better. It's definitely better. I mean, probably a good 100 degrees cooler to the, at least on the external side of this resistor. And if I hold it here long enough, usually I think I've been messing with it, it'll go back down a little bit. Like that's 199. I mean, there it goes. It just went to 200. Pretty steady state though, based off of where I'm holding it at. There, it just went down to 199. And if I hold it onto this heat sink right here, about 160. So the switching, power supply definitely restricts. I'm running out of battery. 165, 170. Okay, good.